Welcome to Authored by Us, a podcast celebrating children's books about characters of color or of different cultural experiences, and the authors who bring these diverse works to life. Each week, we invite you to join us as we turn the pages of these bookshelf gems and hear from their creators who understand that stories of diverse experience truly come to life when authored by us. Here's your host, Zenzi Hodge.
Greetings, listeners. Welcome to Season 2 of Authored by Us. We are back to bring you more authors, feature new books, and share amazing stories. So, kicking off today's episode is definitely a celebration. Like many families, my family's celebrations always included the sharing of a meal. Having meals together is not only a time for communing with loved ones, but cooking is often how some of us show love. At least for me, it is. Cooking for me is an expression of joy, and it connects me to some very powerful memories of learning to cook for my grandmother. I remember watching her cook in the kitchen and learn by her side. While I was a Girl Scout, in order to earn my cooking badge, she didn't just let me fix something simple like baked chicken. I had to bake pizza from scratch with homemade dough. And she was also my troop leader, so I really couldn't get out of that. And I even remember her guiding me over the phone through making gravy for one Thanksgiving meal. And this was before the time of FaceTime and Zoom. She made me her little chef, and I tried to pass that on to my son. Not just the techniques, but the stories and the history of celebrating through our food. This episode's author, David Miller, serves up both food and food for thought in his new book, Chef Toussaint. David C. Miller is a native of Baltimore, Maryland, and has received international acclaim for his book, Dare to be King, What If the Prince Lives? A survival workbook for African American males. It's a thought-provoking 52-week curriculum teaching adolescent males how to survive and thrive in toxic environments. He is a PhD student in the School of Social Work at Morgan State University, focusing on Black fathers. David has written several children's books, including Chef Toussaint, Khalil's Way, The Green Family Farm, Gabe and His Green Thumb, and also a coloring book titled Look Like Me. Thank you for joining us, David, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Super excited to be here today.
I'm so happy to have you. You know, when I read your book, I sent you a message and I said, I really should have read this on a full stomach because after seeing the amazing pictures and reading his story, it really makes someone want to try his food and celebrate through eating. So this was an enthralling book to read, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. So thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
Now, tell us a bit about your book, Chef Toussaint.
Wow. And so I grew up learning how to cook, even though I grew up in Baltimore in an urban community. One of the things that my mom made us do was, we were probably, myself and my brother just passed away a couple of weeks ago. So this particular interview was dedicated to my brother because I haven't done an interview since he passed away. He passed away 5 weeks ago. My mother kept us back in the house to learn how to cook and sew. So even though we were both athletes, we were both, 3-star athletes. We could play 3 sports. We were equally good in 3 sports. While everybody else was headed to the ball field, she would make us stay back and learn how to cook and bake and sew. And then we could go outside and play basketball or football, wrestle, or horseplay with all the rest of the guys in my neighborhood. And although we were really mad at my mother and we would always complain to my father, we were mad. I'm so glad my mother made sure that we learned how to cook and bake and sew. Because I just think that for me, it's an extension of manhood, being able to cook and prepare for my family. So I'm not always worried about, my wife being able to cook. So I learned from my mother and my grandmother how to cook, and I definitely remember my grandmother, because my grandmother, Blanche Shelton, she would never use like measuring cups or spoons. Everything was a pinch of this or a dash of that. And I don't even, when I think back, I don't even think she read the directions, because everything again was a smidgen of this. Mm-hmm. And so the book Chef Toussaint really honors the legacy of Black folks and cooking. And so because much of what I do is really always trying to figure out a way to take a back door to teaching our children history, because I think that the ways in which we teach history is just not working. Mm-hmm. And so you'll find in many of my books, I will introduce through the names of characters, or I'll introduce historical places to introduce, children to the vast history of African and African American history. And so in this particular book, Chef Toussaint is named after the Haitian revolutionary Toussaint Louverture, who most children have never heard of. Yeah. Most adults have never heard of. And so I try to merge my deep passion and understanding of the power of history and the power of storytelling, with food. You put me in a room with a hardcore group of gang members and let me make dinner for them, and I'm gonna win them over, right? Because everybody likes to eat. Everybody likes to eat good food. And then, one of the things that I wanted to also introduce families to is this idea that sometimes we don't need to go to the sub shop on the corner. We don't need to go down to the corner to the little bodega and get a cheesesteak. Like you were telling the story, we can make a homemade pizza, that's right, at home. That's right. We can make a peach cobbler, pecan pie at home, and it becomes a family bonding activity. And that's one of the reasons why I put the recipes in the back, because in many of the communities that I work in, children are not cooking. Yeah. A lot of times meals are prepared in a box. Everything is done through a microwave. And so I really wanted to honor the rich history of our people, and at the same time, kind of really impart a little bit of my life growing up, because again, I could play basketball. I was a great wrestler in high school, but I could cook, and I can still cook.
Right. That is so, so important. I mean, and there's so much that you said. I'm like trying to remember all of these things that I want to talk to you about that. I want to mention that. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a family where all the men can cook, and my dad believed that a man should know how to cook and a woman should know how to change a tire. So there was no gender role. Mm-hmm. You had to know how to do both things. And my late husband, when he met my grandmother, they were talking. And she asked him, "Can you cook?" And he said, "Well, I can microwave." And I said, "You cannot tell my grandmother that." I said, "This is how you do not get approval." But he knowing how to cook was not something that he did. But our son, one of the things that has come out of this pandemic and spending a year and a half at home, we spent a lot of time cooking. So there are things that I've made and that he's watched me make, or he's helped in making, that it's not just teaching him a survival skill. So when he gets out of the house, that he knows how to prepare a meal for himself or to prepare a meal for other people and not just microwave. But it really gave us time to connect. And we connect around food. But you also talked about history. And there's a Netflix special that just came out, High on the Hog, that looks at our food, and not just the food that we eat, but where it's connected to our African culture. And so there's just so much you said that you just shared about cooking that makes so much sense and that we can look at. But the history that you teach by introducing children to Toussaint Louverture is extremely important. Now, why did you pick him as this character? Because you could have picked anyone else. So why is he Chef Toussaint?
One, because he is an African hero that most people don't know about. And I think, going back to my early school years, we only received information about Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King. They may throw in a few other people, but our history was very, very limited. Yet our history is so expansive. In one of my other books, The Green Family Farm, one of the characters in the book is Booker Telephero Washington Green. So he's named after Booker T. Washington. And then I have because I have 3 children. I have 2 daughters and a son. My daughters are always complaining, why am I not writing books for girls? Because all of the books that I write are for boys. And so I do have a book coming out in September. It's called Winnie, the Wizard of Wall Street. And it's an 8-year-old girl who is a financial wizard. Like, she's a stockbroker and she's like 8 years old. And she's named after Winnie Mandela. And so I just really believe that it is really that we have a moral and an ethical responsibility not to wait for school systems or people outside of our community to teach our history. And so introducing a character named after Toussaint Louverture creates opportunities for families to then have their child maybe do a book report or a presentation on Toussaint Louverture, and to talk about to gain an even deeper understanding of geography. I mean, most Americans have no concept of geography. So even understanding where Haiti is, and then understanding, even when you think about what Haiti has gone through over the last 10, 15 years with some of the natural disasters. So again, there's some opportunities to extend the learning.
That's right. One of our authors talked about putting vegetables in the mashed potatoes, So it's a children's book. We're entertaining you, but we're educating you at the same time. And that's really important. But you also mentioned something else about, sub shops down the street, or, buying things that come out of a box. And so in addition to your book giving some historical ties to the African diaspora, you also gave a lesson about supporting Black businesses and sustainability. So this was all in your book. You had, the beekeepers and hand-picked pecans. So I had a sense of someone that is going and supporting whether farms in their community, small businesses in their community, but it was all so very present. Can you tell us about why that was important? And are these based on actual businesses? Because you called a few names. And so my first thought was, oh, wait a minute. Did he say that's in Atlanta? Let me go find them.
Right. And so many people think that I'm kind of an interesting guy. As a family, we've made a decision that we tend to support overwhelmingly Black-owned businesses. And then if it's not a Black-owned business, it's a business of someone of color. And the reason being is because I just believe that it is super important for me to patronize people who look like me, and I just don't think that it's unusual. I think it's pragmatic. I think it's in keeping with honoring the traditions of a people. And so you see other ethnic groups who will support their own plumbers, their own restaurants. And so I see no different. And I'm also trying to help make sure that my children, and I have 2 adult children, one, and my youngest child is 16, understand the importance of racial pride. See, I think along the way, we just don't instill this notion of racial pride, and instilling this idea that honoring who you are and where you come from is so critically important. It's sad that we don't teach most children. A large percentage of children and adults really just don't have any real understanding about Africa other than what we see on TV, and have no interest in traveling to Africa. We'll travel all over the globe. I'm amazed that Black folk will go to Mexico every year, but will not go to Africa. And I just can't I just can't understand it. So even with my book, I use Black illustrators.
Mhm.
I have a Black editor. My graphic designer, CJ Love, it took me a while to find him, but he's a young African-American male who graduated from the Maryland, it's called MICA, the Maryland Institute College of Art. I mean, he graduated from one of the top 5 art colleges in the United States. I held out on this manuscript until I could find him. You know, a lot of self-published authors are using, you know, a whole bunch of different people to do the illustrations, but I wanted to find a young Black male, and he's illustrated 3 of my books, and I love it.
And your illustrations are so vibrant. Like Chef Toussaint looks like a kid that you know. He has features that are so real.
Right.
Like if I saw, like, you walk down the street, oh, there he is. He looks like an actual person that someone knows. And it brings him so much more to life. We do talk with our authors about illustrators and where they find their illustrators or how they find them, and the importance of having an illustrator that understands that when I say a Black child, a Black character, that it's not a Caucasian featured character that has a brown color,
Right.
because it's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that the ability to have proper representation in your books requires having someone who understands who we are, how we look, what are the nuances, whether in our mannerisms or in our appearance, and having the right illustrator really brings our works to life.
Yeah, and particular, I pay particular attention to features: eyes, nose, mouth, you know, lips. And I see so many children's books where the eyes are very bugged out. I mean, and I can look at a book and tell that it was done by an overseas illustrator who probably doesn't understand the Black experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, there's something you mentioned about supporting us, supporting who we are. So you're being intentional about supporting Black businesses or businesses of color. And I, you know, since I was a kid, I'm always, whatever I'm watching, if there is a Black character, if it's a competition, I'm rooting for the Black person.
Oh yeah.
That's kind of a thing that we do. And so I'm a huge fan of cooking shows, and I also collect cookbooks. And so as I watch shows like Top Chef and Master Chef, I started to notice a lot of Black chefs, some acclaimed chefs, some up and coming chefs, and I'm like, this is amazing. You have Marcus Samuelson of Red Rooster in Harlem, and then you have up and coming chefs like Eric Ajapong. His family is from Ghana, and Gregory Gourdet. He is actually of Haitian descent, and so they are bringing our food to 5-star restaurants and creating their own concepts, which is absolutely amazing. You know, you could have written a children's book about anything, and you could have named your character after Toussaint Louverture, and this could have been a kid that was building rockets, but you chose to write a book about a kid chef. Why?
So in many of the neighborhoods that I've historically worked in across the country, children have forgotten how to dream. Children don't necessarily know how to dream. And so one of the things that I really want to do is make and create an environment where children understand their fullest potential. So if you like to eat and your mom, your grandma, your dad, you know, you're doing things in the kitchen and you see that you made some pancakes and they turned out well, that's the making of a chef. But if we don't talk to you about opportunities about being a chef, that you can go to, there is a such thing called culinary school that you may not have ever heard of. That you may not have ever met anyone who's gone to culinary school. That these are the opportunities that await, but it's our responsibility as adults to steward the trajectory of young people. And so whether it's like in the book that I have coming out later on in the summer about a little girl who likes to play the stock market. I mean, how many of us, when you growing up in the hood, how many of us know a stockbroker? Mm-hmm. You know, how many of us know that? You might hear on the news and you might see a feature on the news about stocks and bonds, but I'm creating a character, a 9-year-old girl who plays with dolls and does all of that other stuff, but she's a whiz reading the New York Stock Exchange. And so it's really about dream creation. And so I want young people to see Toussaint, and I want them to believe and understand that they have the ability to be a chef.
And he is an amazing chef, because in the book, I don't want to give all of it away.
Yeah, don't give him everything.
He does some fantastic things. He creates some amazing dishes. And you share a piece of those dishes in the back of the book. So you share some of the recipes. But my question is there a cookbook for Chef Toussaint that I can buy to add to the collection? And what's next for Chef Toussaint?
So it's interesting that you say that, because I'm in the lab daily thinking about next steps, and I'm thinking about doing a children's cookbook and soliciting recipes from other young people.
All right.
But there'll definitely, so I'm thinking about the cookbook, but I'm also thinking about doing there will definitely be a sequel to the book coming out. And I'm going to put it on the fast track, but stay tuned.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. Authored by Us is made possible by listeners like you. We thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
So we are back with author David Miller. So David, you told us some about Chef Toussaint, but you also hinted that there's some additional books that you have. So I'd like for you to just share with us all of the books that you have in your personal author's library.
So one of my favorite, Chef Toussaint and Gabe and His Green Thumb are two of my favorite books. Gabe and His Green Thumb, actually we just received notification that our book was added to the elementary school summers list through the Black Caucus of the American Library Association.
Wow,
so
congratulations.
Thank you. It's one of the recommended, books. So, again, just like cooking, I feel that it's super important for children to be able to put their hands in the soil and to be able to learn how to plant, vegetables and watch them grow, and then take them from, growing outside or starting them in a pot in the house, and then being able to sit down and eat the corn or eat the kale that you have grown. I think it's a tremendous, life skill. And it also honors the agricultural tradition in our community. And so I've written 2 books that really look at farming and growing food, if you will. Gabe and His Green Thumb is a story about a magical young man who's able to grow championship size carrots and cucumbers. And it's just a super powerful story. And then Brooklyn's Finest, the Green Family Farm, which is set in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. Jay-Z had one of his albums called Brooklyn's Finest. And it's the story of the Green family who are living in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And there's a vacant lot across the street from their home. They decide to petition the city to get to be able to purchase that plot of land, because it's become sort of a dumping ground. There are old tires and mattresses there. And they grab friends, family members, kids from school, neighbors. They clean it up and they turn it into an organic garden. And they're growing fruits and vegetables, and they're giving fruits and vegetables away to people in the community. And they've also been able to sell fresh fruits and vegetables to some of the other, bodegas in the community. I did a coloring book and it's called They Look Like Me, because oftentimes, even as simple as things like, representation of Black people in coloring books. You just don't necessarily see it.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a coloring book, and then I did a curriculum. One of my major bodies of work is called Dare to Be King. If you can see this, What If the Prince Lives? And this is a curriculum that I decided to design for a number of reasons. One, I was a school teacher, and I started realizing that with my Black male students, the issue wasn't whether or not they could do the schoolwork. The issue was that they were navigating the fact that many of these young guys had already experienced multiple traumas by age 12. Growing up in neighborhoods where you are conditioned to hear ambulances and gunfire every night. Like, so that is the lullaby. That's the tune that you go to sleep at night, listening to gunfire, people yelling and screaming, and ambulances. These were the students that I was teaching, right? And so that, coupled with when I was an undergraduate student, I was at Morgan State in Baltimore. My best friend was at Morehouse in Atlanta. He had come home during summer vacation. Some guys robbed us at gunpoint because we didn't have the money that they wanted. They started shooting. My best friend was shot in the back with a sawed-off shotgun. He died in my arms. So I took my tragedy along with, I ended up dropping out of college, but ended up, going back. I took what I learned kind of navigating the streets of Baltimore, coupled with, I completed my undergraduate degree and was working on my master's degree in education. I decided to take all of that to design a curriculum that would teach young men how to navigate living in these communities, because it takes a degree of navigation when you growing up in neighborhoods where as soon as you walk out your door and make a right and you on your way to school, there's some dudes out there in the corner that's trying to get you to join a gang, or trying to get you to sell drugs, or telling you not to listen to what your parents are teaching you, right? Or when you're going to a school where the school is as dangerous as the community. I mean, it takes a degree of training, if you will. So we've literally developed a curriculum to train young men how to navigate these situations. And so, for example, there's a section in the curriculum around what to do when stopped by the police. I developed this piece called The 10 Rules of Survival When Stopped by the Police. It's been, featured on CNN a couple of times, and PBS and MSNBC. Literally, there is a I'm trying to think of the best word. There's some rules of engagement that we teach Black men and boys, that if you are stopped by the police, these are the 10 things that these are the 10 rules that you need to follow. And then no guarantees. There are no guarantees that if you even follow these 10 rules, you're going to make it home safely. But we believe in most situations, if you follow these 10 rules, you increase the likelihood that you're going to get home safely. And some of the rules are, some of the rules are, and some of the assumptions are that it's not when and if, but if you're Black and male in America, you're going to be stopped by the police. Yeah. And so part of what we got to get our community to understand is that we have it's sad. It's painful that we have to teach our boys and our girls these rules, but the goal is survival. And so that's also in the curriculum. A lot of work is done in the curriculum, and there are activities in the curriculum working with boys who grew up without a father or a father figure, because that produces what we call daddy rage. When a boy and a girl grow up without a healthy, ongoing, sober, responsible, spiritually guided dad in their life or father figures, many times it creates a level of anger, rage, and hostility that we see on the streets. And so we engage these young boys around what is it like to grow up without a dad, and try to help them understand that they can't blame themselves because their dad was either not ready or unable to be the kind of life-affirming parent that they needed. So the curriculum really deals with some really heavy content around producing healthy, sober and responsible Black boys who will become men.
Wow. So when I saw the workbook and I read about it, I knew this is something that I wanted us to be able to discuss because it's a 52-week curriculum. So this is a year-long program, but it's not something that ends after that. It's most likely something that has to be refreshed. And you would encourage that young man to go back through it.
Yes.
As we often talk about how we, whether it's as parents, as authors, as educators, interact with our audience of color, be that your child, your student, or your young reader. We look at it from I'm a Black woman, you're a Black man, and we're talking to Black children. But these Black children are not always in environments where the other side that they're talking to look like them. They may be in schools with teachers who they may not even have a teacher of color. Or they may be in other programs where they may be the only one. And so having a resource like Dare to Be King is important, but how do we help to make a connection where it's not Zenzi, the Black mom, that knows this is something that has to be done for her child, but that it's a white parent whose child is my son's friend, or it's a teacher or an administrator at my son's school, that it's able to see those things that impact him in his life, impact another student in his life, that when that child comes to school, they don't leave these other things, these traumas behind. They bring the traumas with them to school. And so if they're in a school experience where the people that they interact with daily are tone deaf, then they are not getting the support that they need. How do we work on that? I don't even want to ask how we resolve that. How do we address that?
That's a whole institute. That's a whole day institute. But we have work to do. And if we want this country to be all that we say it ought to be, these deeper conversations around race, we have to have them, but then we also have to begin to start looking at access and equity. I mean, we can talk about equality, but we got to start talking about equity. And then we got to start looking at, systems that make a lot of decisions, oftentimes where you have these systems that are top heavy, white administrators, all white board members. And so they like to talk about diversity at the annual meeting, but you don't even see diversity represented within the institution. And so there's some deeper conversations that we need to have, and we got to start pushing folks toward action. And I think that, for me, there's such a rich historical legacy. One of the things that I'm always in awe of is the Montgomery Bus Boycott. And I could teach a series of classes to young people and adults about the Montgomery Bus Boycott, because the Montgomery Bus Boycott lasted 381 days, and it was an act of solidarity that said we are no longer going to be mistreated. And so what has to happen in this country, Black folk and our allies, we just need to pick a company, right? We just need to pick a company and say we're not going to support that company anymore until there's more hiring of Black and brown people in upper level management, until there's a shift in your board of directors. And so I think that we have to vote with our feet, because there's power in numbers. There's power in numbers. And I think that the children, the young folks who were coming of age during the civil rights movement learned so much from that sustained level of activism, right? And so, I think that, with Black Lives Matter and some of the other movements, I think it's high time for us to really be focused on, institution building, right? And focusing more on Black business ownership. One of the things that I'm just so tickled about, one of my, and when you come to DC, if you have time, I'll take you by there. Mahogany Books.
Yeah. Yep.
Is in DC. They're opening up a second location. Dynamic husband and wife, Derek and Ramunda Young. I mean, they've created, in one period, they sold about 100,000 books in about 6 months. Black books, Black authors, right? And so you have Harriet's in Philadelphia, a Black feminist bookstore that's doing really, really well. So you have some thriving Black bookstores and restaurants across the country that we really, really need to support, because those are the tangible lessons that we need to teach our children about access. And so I think that that's the work, that's the real work that we need to do. And we need to support. I mean, like, for example, just like you shared, there were restaurants that I supported during the pandemic because I knew they needed my dollars. So I would buy a meal, even though I could have just went home and ate.
That's correct.
Those are the things that we have to do. And I call it tribal economics.
Oh.
And then we have to teach our children, like even when my children were younger, I would go in, and if we had dinner at a restaurant and the service was great, I would ask the waiter or the waitress, can I speak to the manager? And of course, they automatically think something is wrong.
Something's wrong.
I want to let the manager know that the service and that the food was absolutely outstanding. And I'm going to share this on my social media page. Well, right. Even when my children were younger, there wasn't a lot of social media out, but I'm going to tell other people.
That's right.
That's what we have to do when we start talking about sustaining our community and really being able to exercise our economic might. So when there are incidents of police brutality in cities, like in North Carolina, I forgot what city, and they won't release the body camera footage, or we're going to make you release the body camera footage, because we're going to pick a company, a thriving company, a corporation, and we're going to boycott it. And we're not spending our money till you release the body cam footage.
We have to be as committed and vigilant in where we spend our dollars. So what is it, like 2 years ago when everyone was on the Popeyes chicken sandwich?
Yeah.
And people stood in line and everybody shared it on social media, and people committed to that. You have to be as committed in the withholding of your dollars.
True. True.
My dad always tells us, let people miss let them miss your presence. Let them feel your absence. And that's a piece of what we have to be able to do.
Right.
Your books, and you touched on this a little bit, that your books feature male characters to the point where your daughter's like, well, hey, what about the girls? But I love that you are featuring positive male characters. My mother has shared with me, she's like, Zenzi, you mentioned it a lot about it's all books all about boys, or, there was no mom present. And she asked if it bothers me. I'm like, no, it doesn't bother me, because when I was young, I was always looking for girl things. But now, because I have a son, I want him to see himself. If it's in his books, he wants to see books that are written by someone who looks like him, who is writing about characters who look like him. That is extremely, extremely important. It's important to him. It's important to me. So why has this been your writing assignment, your writing mission?
So as I indicated, I used to be a school teacher. And when you look at the data, National Assessment for Educational Progress, you do see our little guys kind of lag behind girls in terms of both literacy, reading and math. And I think a lot of that is because they're not getting this. They're not getting bold images and creative storylines featuring Black male characters who are having fun. Who are just ordinary little guys who are just having fun, who are just cool, who are just, and you see, we have Chef Toussaint, with a shout out to Chadwick Boseman, Black Panther. And so you're talking about little guys.
I didn't even notice that.
You didn't notice that? Yeah, I mean, so you just, and it's interesting because one of the things that we do when we meet with schools and we work with students, even before they open up the book, we have them to tell us about the cover.
Nice.
And the children be like, oh, that's what I saw in Black Panther. And so, just really helping these little guys understand that reading is fun, that reading is cool, and that reading can save your life. For me growing up, I didn't like school, but reading saved my life. I would cut school. I would leave school early to go to the library. We'd sneak in the library and read. Like, because I just love books, and the stuff that they were talking about in school, I just couldn't relate to.
I had a teacher tell me a couple of years ago that, my son was reading in class. So she's teaching a lesson and he would have a book inside of his textbook. And I wanted to be mad, but I couldn't be mad.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay. And all I could say to him is that I appreciate that you love to read, but I need you to kind of pay attention to whatever that subject is. And then you can read after,
right.
But that's, we want them to be so excited about books and to read and to make it a part of not just their educational tasks, but it's recreational as well. Not just summer reading because I have to for school, but because I really want to. And I read an article where you were quoted earlier this year as saying, all too often, your zip code determines your access to books. What do you mean by that? And what do you hope will be the impact of your books?
So depending upon where you live, ultimately determines your access to books, because a lot of times, even the very schools that you attend, many times they won't buy the books. And so, again, I understand this emphasis on technology, but like if you look at the school's reading scores, and if your school's reading scores are low or subpar, but yet we're spending all this money on extra technology, there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I know a lot of times for a lot of families who are literally in survival mode, buying a book is just not on the list. And so for me, I'm hoping to raise money because I just want to give books away. I don't even want to sell books. So I'm really thinking about doing a GoFundMe project, for the city that I grew up in, which is Baltimore, and figuring out a way to raise money to like just give away 3,000 books over the summer. And like with street teams, like we out there with backpacks, we got our books, I got my Sharpie, and we just rolling through neighborhoods, signing books and just giving them to students.
I think it's important, and you are correct, that not every neighborhood has a library.
Right.
Not every neighborhood has a public library. There's some places where the libraries are closed during the hours when children are out of school. They may not fully be open during the summer. And not every child has access to books.
True.
Yeah.
True.
I applaud you for wanting to work on getting more books into the hands of young readers. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Authored by Us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review so you never miss an episode. Now back to the show with your host, Zenzi Hodge.
So David, tell us where we can not just find Chef Toussaint, but all of your books.
So, of course, you can find them on Amazon, but I would prefer you to go to my website, IamDavidMiller.com. IamDavidMiller.com. And I always try to tell people to go to the authors, particularly independent authors, go directly to our websites because, we have to, when you go through Amazon already gets a lot of money. So IamDavidMiller.com. I'll sign the books and send them to you. And you can find me on most social media platforms, David Miller. I'm on most. I'm pretty easy to find.
And not to worry, listeners, we still have our Authored by Us bookshelf, which will provide you a link directly to David's website so you can purchase his book from him. And his author's profile will include his social media handle, so you can keep in touch with him that way as well.
Mm-hmm.
So as authors, we always have stories that we want to tell, but we haven't told all of our stories. So is there a story that David has yet to tell?
So there is, but I can't. Here's what I can tell you, because I can't get in. I can't get into the finer details.
Okay.
But there's a story that I want to write about one of my wife's family members, and it is one of the best untold stories in the sports world, about an African-American Olympian who no one knows about. And a lot of it is because what he had to deal with in terms of racism.
Wow.
And it's a story that I want to turn into a book. Wow. And it's going to be a really powerful story. So that's one. Another story that I want to tell is most people who know me will tell you that the defining period of my life was reading the Autobiography of Malcolm X.
All right.
Because even though I have, mother and father, and even though I got great family values, like most young men, it's easy to kind of get pulled into the wrong direction. But it was something about reading the Autobiography of Malcolm X that just grabbed hold of me. And I'd really and there's been a bunch of books written on Malcolm X, particularly for adults, but I'd like to figure out a way to do a really creative book on Malcolm X's life, really looking at the 5 or 6 major developmental phases in Malcolm's life and really break it down for young people. Because I think most people tell the story of Malcolm going from, kind of Detroit Red, the wayward young man, and then we kind of gloss over what happened to him in prison, and then, becoming a minister in the Nation of Islam. But I think that there's just so much more meat and really, really looking more deeply at Malcolm's early life. Malcolm's family were Garveyites.
Yes,
that most people don't realize. And so I'm really, and I've met and spent time with one of Malcolm's daughters, and I've been to the Malcolm X museum in Omaha a bunch of times. Mm-hmm. And so really trying to think really creatively, because there've been a lot of things already written about Malcolm X, ways to present it in a way for young people that really will help particularly these harder to reach young people who don't really believe that their life is valuable. How we can present Malcolm as more than just sort of a hero, but someone who had to endure a lot of pain before he realized his true calling. And so, because I just think that so many young people just don't know about Malcolm X and who Malcolm was and what he stood for, and just within the context of manhood, that manhood for him was an ever evolving process. That manhood just doesn't stop. Mm-hmm. That it's an evolving process. So I was a man at 21, but I was a man at 30. I was a man at 40, and now a man at 50. Mm-hmm. I wish, some of you always hear people say, I wish I would have known then what I knew now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'd like to do a piece on Malcolm X, but I'm also going to be doing a series of books on characters and stories that I'm going to develop based on some of my travels to Africa.
Nice.
Yeah, and so I've fallen in love with Ghana. I've been to Ghana 11 times.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was actually supposed to be in Ghana for 6 weeks because I just won a Fulbright award that was taking me to Ghana to actually work on a really unique project. I was actually going to be working with a team of educators. We were going to be developing some curriculum templates for school children, K through 6th grade, to teach school children what life in Africa is like. So we're going to be developing these mini curriculum templates. but my trip is postponed until 2022.
Wow.
So those are a couple of projects that and the last one. So pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, I was doing some really amazing workshops with boys around being a husband and what does being a husband look like, and understanding relationships and understanding marriage. Just I'm talking about some amazing conversations with 12 and 13-year-old boys about what does it mean to be a husband?
That's right.
What do husbands do? What do wives do? And really kind of listening to all of the stuff that these boys are hearing. And then we would wrap them. We would bring in other men. We had all of the men. They would bring in their wedding albums, and we would do a gallery walk. And we would have men who were in their early 20s and then men in their 70s, and they would bring in their wedding pictures and photo albums. And then we would just do a gallery walk and have the boys kind of, and then we would just kind of talk about it. Because I don't think that we are preparing young men to be in relationships.
We're not.
Yeah. So people have asked me to put that in the form of a curriculum, which intrigues me, because it would definitely be a challenge. But I just really believe that, even my son is 21. Mm-hmm. We've been trying to prepare him to be a husband. Right. You can't wait till they 18, 19 years old to prepare them to be a husband. Got to start younger.
And you cannot tell them the night before they get married.
You can't tell them when they getting ready to walk up to altar, and you give them, whatever advice you want to give them. No.
Correct, because they're also seeing different things, and I like the fact that you have husbands at various ages. Advice I always give friends and family members when they're getting married. I always tell them, I said, you need to have marriage mentors. You need to find like newlyweds who are just like you. This is like, oh my God, it's wonderful. We're all happy. And we're in this new thing together. Said, but then you also need to find some folks that have been married like 15 years because they have experienced some things. And they're not sure whether, they're going to make dinner for their husband tonight or they're going to put him out of the house. But
that's real.
You've got to have that type of person, those type of people, that couple that you can kind of work through that with. And then you need some older people, like older people, like grandparents, where they have gone through listen, I'm going to cook dinner for you. I am going to put you out the house, but I still love you.
I'm going to let you eat first before I put you out.
Correct. And they've had a chance, they're seasoned in their relationship. And so they have gone through the highs, they've gone through the lows, and they've gone through the highs and the lows at the same time. And so you just need to be able to have mentorship through, it's just like anything, how you have mentors at work. And, you have like a buddy or a mentor at school. You need that for your relationships. And I think that's extremely important. True. So when you do have that curriculum built and that course ready, let us know.
Will do.
Now, you mentioned the Autobiography of Malcolm X as a book that had that kind of turned a page for you. And so I always ask authors about the book that had the biggest impact on them. So if it is the Autobiography of Malcolm X, I will absolutely take that because that is one of my favorite books. But was there a book, if not the Autobiography of Malcolm X, another book that had the most impact on you when you were growing up?
Up From Slavery, Booker T. Washington was another, really, really serious book. I was actually mad at the school system when I really found out about the depth and the breadth of Booker T. Washington, in particular Du Bois. I was angry. Like, how come I couldn't get this? Why didn't I get this in school? Me learning about Du Bois and Garvey and Booker T and Ida B. Wells and Sojourner Truth at a deeper level. And I just don't think we're giving that to our children. I don't think that we are. There's just so much. A week ago, myself and one of my mentors, we did a session on looking at how Black music can help heal Black men. And so we started with, we went through just a serious list of music, played some selections, broke them down. When one of my mentor, he started off, again, because we only had like 75 minutes. So we started off with some African music, Caribbean music, and then we went into some Al Green, some Curtis Mayfield. We kind of talked about the historical significance of those artists, Marvin Gaye. Then we looked at a little jazz and blues, B.B. King, Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, and then even looking at all of these Black musicians who were at the genius level who died young.
Yeah.
Otis Redding was only 26. Mm-hmm. Marvin Gaye, Donny Hathaway. Mm-hmm. And then I did the presentation on hip hop. Yes. So really looked at, because DMX has just passed away, looked at deep DMX through a deeper lens, because mainstream media would just make you believe that he was a drug addict, but he was deeply scarred and torn because of his childhood.
That's right. And
so I just think that there's just so much knowledge in books, in films, in documentaries. We do a workshop with parents around movies that you have to watch with your Black male child. You have to watch Antoine Fisher with his son and break it down. You got to watch John Q. I love Denzel Washington, and talk about that's an authentic expression of manhood. Are you ready to die for your child and your family? The answer is yes. There isn't any debate. That scene with John Q, when he's telling the man, shoot me and take my internal organs so my son can live.
Yes.
That's authentic manhood.
Yes. Because he said, I never planned on killing anybody else. This was just for me.
Right.
Yeah.
The great debaters.
Yes.
Do what you have to do so you can do what you want to do. So there's just so many documentaries and films that we can use, and books to breathe life in our community. But see, we keep waiting for somebody else to save us. Ain't nobody else coming to save us. We got to do it.
So, I started writing your list of the movies you were talking about. So I know you probably have some more. So I'm going to be sure to get those from you.
We're going to be publishing a list. Excuse me. We're going to be publishing a list within the next couple weeks. Okay. Did you see the movie A Time to Kill?
Absolutely.
With Samuel L. Jackson.
Absolutely. Before he was Nick Fury, Right. Yeah. And I find myself telling parents that there are certain things that my son and I watch that we may not have watched, that he probably would have watched with his dad, or we may not have watched or engaged with had it not been for the pandemic. But it has allowed us to have certain conversations that are essential, that probably would not have come up or would not have come up in the way in which they did. There are things that he needed to see. There are things that he needs to hear. And even if he was younger, that I would extrapolate certain pieces from certain movies. So he has seen The Great Debaters, but before he saw The Great Debaters, he saw Denzel's character perform I Too. Because he did it for a presentation for school. And I not only wanted him to see how it's delivered, but I also wanted him to understand what was being conveyed in that moment and understanding context as you look at the entire movie. So there's so much value. And I think that as an author, as an actor, as any creative, as a musician, DMX, my son's a huge DMX fan, because who knew that he was going to leave us when he did? But about a month before he died, I drove him to school listening to DMX all the time. And there is so much that you can impart, that you can share. There, you teach a lot about rhythm and rhyme when you're listening to music, You teach about imagery. They're in language arts classes and they're learning about literary devices, but you not only get that from books, you get that from the music, because these are words that are written before they're performed, and you also have to reach them where they are.
Yeah, because we think that they want to sit down and read Zora Neale Hurston or Baldwin or Ellison or Chester Himes. They don't have to. We got to create a context and a bridge, so we can start off with something by DMX and then introduce them. Are you familiar with Chester Himes?
Yes.
Chester Himes was one of the earliest Black writers who wrote sort of these kind of racy stories about racy, gritty urban life. So we can introduce them to Chester Himes, Harlem Renaissance writer, through DMX.
Correct.
But it takes some work.
And it also requires teachers to, be a little creative. So my son, I think, was in the 7th grade, and his teacher asked them to take a current song and tie it into an earlier song that had similar themes. And, he was looking for something. I was like, I don't know anything that's out right now. I said, but as current, I can give you current. You can pick some Nas. And I believe he took Nas, and I can't remember the earlier artist that he picked, but they were charged with finding music from the hip hop genre and linking it to music that was probably from a Renaissance period or even to the 60s. And those are the kinds of assignments that allow a child to realize that it's not everything that comes in a book, and also that the media in which that I engage with, whether it's music or whatever type of music, it's not something that's separate and apart of what I can learn in a classroom, because they have to be able to learn in different ways. And be able to see themselves in what they're learning, and not be made to feel that their culture or their experiences have no place in their academic setting.
True.
So I have one more question for you. I know we've covered various and sundry things. David, tell us, what do you think inspires the next generation of authors, and what do you think gets our children excited about reading?
So let me take the latter question. I think the misnomer is that our children are not excited about reading. I think that they are. We just got to do a better job as authors of being really creative with our storyline, and making sure that we engage children in our writing and in the illustrations at a higher level. I think what inspires the next generation of writers is things like you're doing, highlighting and celebrating writers, being able to lift the hood up under the car and kind of figuring out what the passion of writers are, who's driving writers. Because I do think that we're in a sort of a Renaissance period, if you will, that a lot of people are putting children's books out. A lot of people are putting children's books out in a space that had been dominated basically by white women.
Yes.
And so I'm excited that I'm seeing, and so many new authors are reaching out to me on Instagram. And so I think we got to raise the quality of our books. And I think that we got to do a better job of also interfacing with school. A lot of what I do is really connecting with school districts to help school districts understand you don't have to just go to Scholastic.
No.
Or Simon & Schuster or Random House. Right. There are authors like myself and others who, because I've been trained and I work with some of the best. Jerry Craft is one of my mentors. Derek Barnes, Kwame Alexander. I mean, and so, but many of them have really great deals with publishing houses, but all of them started as self-published authors. And so, I just think we got to get these books in schools. When I show up at a school and they get this book,
I
mean, it's like Jay-Z walked in the building. And so that's what I'm trying to do. Hope I can get to the Virgin Islands and do some stuff with you guys. Would love to come on over and do some stuff. I'm very partial to warm weather. So any invitation will be most excited about that.
Well, warm weather we have a lot of young readers, and we're always excited to introduce authors to our students. So we'll have to work that out and make sure that you have a chance to come down here, share Chef Toussaint, share Gabe and his Green Thumb, and all of your books with the students we have here in the Virgin Islands. David, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. This was a fantastic way to kick off our first episode for season 2. You gave us so much to work with today, talking about your books and talking about your experiences. So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. And continue to promote authors. I love it.
As we get ready to close the cover on this Bookshelf Jam, I would love to thank our author today, Mr. David C. Miller, for sharing with us his book, Chef Toussaint, and all of his amazing books. You know, I'm so happy for us to be back for season 2. Listeners, thank you for coming back and joining us. We invite you to join us again next week as we introduce a new author sharing their book. Until next time, happy reading.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Authored by Us. Every author has a story to tell, and we enjoy bringing their stories to you each week. Whether you are listening as a young reader or are sharing this podcast with the young readers in your life, we are delighted to celebrate these stories inspired by diversity and shared in the voice of their authors. Follow us on social media at Authored by Us and subscribe to our podcast using your favorite podcast app. That way you never miss an episode. Have a gem on your bookshelf that we should have on ours? Visit us online at authoredbyus.com and let us know. Until next time, happy reading.